people who spend more time alone grow faster than people who spend their lives performing. You've felt this, haven't you? The moment you step away from the crowd, the world stops being so loud. You stop pretending. You stop chasing. You stop molding yourself into whatever version of you keeps everyone else comfortable, and in the silence, your real mind wakes up. You start noticing the things they overlook. You start seeing the patterns they keep repeating. You start recognizing the truths they're too distracted to face. Tell me, hasn't solitude shown you more about people than people ever showed you about themselves? You were never drawn to groups, not because you couldn't fit in, but because something in you never wanted to. Even as a child, the crowd felt too loud, too chaotic, too performative, like everyone was acting, and you were the only one who noticed. Noise drains you in a way you could never explain. 5 minutes in the wrong room can take more from you than 5 hours alone ever could. Meanwhile, silence does something to you that it doesn't do for most people. It restores you. It clears the fog. It brings your mind back home to itself. It's where you can finally hear your own thoughts without everyone else's opinions sitting on top of them. You don't just observe the world. You study it. You notice things people say without thinking. You catch the shifts in their tone, the contradictions in their stories, the way their eyes move before they tell a lie, the discomfort behind their jokes, the anger behind their silence. You see the things they hide between their words, the insecurity, the longing, the fear, the unspoken truth. You read people in a way that makes others feel exposed, even when you haven't said a thing. And because of that, you've always been different, even before you had a name for it. People told you you were too quiet, too intense, too observant, too distant, too hard to read. But what they meant was, you see too much. You see what they hide, what they deny, what they refuse to feel. You walk into a room and instantly feel the emotional temperature before anyone speaks. You sense tension in the air like a storm no one admits is coming. You see patterns in people long before the consequences show up. While others move blindly from moment to moment, you're already 3 steps ahead, not because you're paranoid, but because you've been paying attention your entire life. You're the kind of person who notices when someone's smile doesn't reach their eyes, when their confidence is cracked, when their kindness is performative, when their apology is a strategy, not sincerity. You feel the undercurrents that most people ignore. You've always lived at a depth most people never explore. And that depth made you different, not difficult. It set you apart in ways you didn't choose, but eventually had to accept. You've felt misunderstood more times than you can count. Not because you were wrong, but because the people around you weren't capable of seeing you clearly. People called you distant when you were just discerning. People called you intense when you were simply aware. People called you hard to get to know when they were only comfortable with shallow waters. But being misunderstood doesn't mean you're broken. It means you don't speak the same emotional language as the world around you. You were never meant for surface-level connections. You were built for depth. And the truth is this: you didn't choose solitude. You were shaped by it. You learned early that solitude isn't loneliness, it's clarity. It's the only place where you can soften your guard and feel the full weight of who you are without anyone diluting it. When you're alone, your thoughts stop competing with the world's noise. Your real self steps forward. Your intuition sharpens. Your insights expand. Alone is where your mind breathes. Alone is where your truth speaks. And somewhere along the way, you realized you weren't avoiding people. You were outgrowing the environments that kept you numb. You weren't withdrawing. You were waking up. You weren't isolating. You were returning to yourself. Your solitude is not a failure of belonging. It's evidence of your evolution. Because the further you rise in consciousness, the less tolerance you have for noise, drama, performing, mindless socializing, and connections without depth. You don't need a crowd. You don't need validation. You don't need constant stimulation to feel alive. You just need space to think, to breathe, to see clearly. And you've always seen clearly, far more clearly than the world ever realized. This section of your life, this chapter of your identity, isn't the story of someone who doesn't fit in. It's the story of someone who was never meant to blend in with the noise. It's the story of someone who sees the world from a vantage point most people never reach. It's the story of someone who has always been different, not by accident, but by design. Here's the part most people will never understand. You didn't choose solitude. The world made it safer than people ever did. Somewhere along the way, you learned that being around others meant adapting, masking, adjusting, carrying emotional weight that no one else even noticed. Being alone didn't frighten you. Being misunderstood did. Being drained did. Being judged for your depth did. So you stepped back, not because you lacked connection, but because the connections available to you didn't feel real. And whether you realized it or not, your nervous system adjusted. Hypervigilance sharpened your perception. While others coasted through interactions without thinking twice, you were scanning everything: the shift in someone's tone, the fake enthusiasm, the tension under their smile, the moment their eyes flickered with something unsaid. Your nervous system learned to read people not from their words, but from the inconsistencies between their words and their energy. It wasn't paranoia, it was survival. It was your mind learning that truth often hides in the places people try hardest to cover up. Being the observer taught you human behavior in its rawest form. You saw how people treat those they don't need, how they perform when attention is on them, how quickly their masks fall when they believe no one is watching. You learned the patterns, how people chase validation, how they crumble under silence, how they betray themselves to fit in, how they rewrite their personalities to match the room they're standing in. You didn't learn this from books. You learned it by witnessing the world from just far enough away to see the entire picture. Quiet people develop deeper internal worlds, not because they're withdrawn, but because the external world never matched the depth of their inner one. While others were busy performing, your mind was making meaning. If this content is making sense to you, click the subscribe button and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for your support. While they were lost in noise, you were piecing together truth. While they were filling every empty moment with distraction, you were exploring the places they're terrified to go: your emotions, your patterns, your wounds, your intuition. Solitude didn't stunt your growth. It accelerated it. It forced you to confront yourself. It gave you time to think without interruption. It sharpened your insight, your discernment, your emotional maturity. You had conversations with yourself that most people avoid for decades. You faced truths that others drown out with stimulus, entertainment, and noise. Because constant noise keeps people asleep. It numbs their intuition. It drowns out the discomfort they refuse to face. Silence wakes the mind. Silence brings up the questions they don't want to ask. Who am I without the crowd? Why do I need so much approval? What am I running from? What do I actually feel? That's why so many people fear being alone. They're afraid of meeting the parts of themselves they've spent a lifetime avoiding. But when you're alone, your mask drops. You don't have to say the right thing. You don't have to entertain anyone. You don't have to pretend you're okay. You don't have to play a version of yourself that fits the room you're in. Alone is where the real self emerges. The self that isn't edited or softened or shaped to match anyone else's expectations. That's why your insights feel different from the people around you. You don't just think, you reflect. You don't just feel, you understand the mechanics beneath the feeling. You don't just notice patterns, you see the emotional architecture behind them. And while most people spend their entire lives trying to impress the world, you've spent your life understanding it. Your distance didn't make you disconnected. It made you aware. Your quiet didn't make you small. It made you perceptive. Your solitude didn't make you lonely. It made you conscious. What others call too deep, too intense, too serious is simply the result of a mind that hasn't been dulled by constant distraction. While they avoided silence to escape themselves, you used silence to find yourself. This is the dark truth. You think differently because you've had no choice but to. The world demanded performance. Your mind demanded honesty. They escaped themselves in groups. You met yourself in solitude. And that path, that inner path, is why you see what everyone else misses. There's a moment in every lone wolf's life where confusion turns into clarity, where the traits you once questioned in yourself begin to reveal their real purpose. You're not antisocial, you're anti-superficial. You don't withdraw from people. You withdraw from environments that ask you to be less than who you are. You outgrow shallow conversations faster than others can start them. You don't have the patience to talk about people instead of ideas, or gossip instead of growth, or drama instead of depth. You're built for meaning, not noise. And when you don't engage in the small talk that keeps most relationships stitched together, people misjudge your silence as coldness. They assume you're uninterested when really, you're uninterested in anything that requires you to shrink your mind to fit the moment. You are not detached. You're discerning. You don't offer your energy to everyone because you know how much it costs to give it away. And when people can't read you, they panic. They misinterpret your depth as distance. They misunderstand your independence as arrogance. They assume you're lonely because you're alone, but they never consider the possibility that you choose solitude because it's the only place your authenticity can breathe. People don't understand that you don't pull away. You simply stop pretending. You stop performing interest where there is none. You stop acting smaller to make others comfortable. You stop faking enthusiasm for connections that don't feel real. Your withdrawal isn't rejection, it's alignment. It's you choosing what nourishes you instead of what drains you. And because most people confuse conformity with connection, your self-sufficiency feels threatening. You're not uninterested. You're uninterested in the inauthentic. You don't have the tolerance for relationships held together by convenience, validation, or fear of being alone. You would rather have one real conversation than 20 shallow ones. One loyal connection than a room full of spectators. You see what others miss simply because you're not addicted to noise. You're not constantly reaching for distraction or stimulation or approval. Your mind isn't cluttered with everyone else's opinions, so you notice the subtleties, the intention behind someone's kindness, the insecurity behind someone's confidence, the hesitation behind someone's words, the lie behind the smile. You see the emotional architecture beneath people's personalities because your perception isn't drowned by the need to belong. And you don't need crowds to confirm your identity. You don't rely on group approval to validate your worth. You don't need constant social interaction to feel real. You don't shapeshift to fit into the space you're standing in. You know who you are without audience, without applause, without a crowd echoing your existence back to you. And this right here, is your superpower. Because while the world is built for people who need to be seen to know they exist, you've become someone who sees yourself without anyone else's permission. The truth is, you were never meant to blend in with the crowd. You were never meant to dilute your insight to make it easier for others to digest. You were never meant to collapse your depth to match someone else's comfort. You're not broken. You're not distant. You're not too much or too intense or too private. They never understood your language. Your inner world runs deep. Most people stay on the surface where the performance is easy. Your decisions emerge from intuition, while others act from whatever urge appears in the moment. Your attention goes inward and outward with precision. Theirs scatters in the noise. You gravitate to truth. Comfort tends to claim them. You have spent your whole life thinking differently because your mind was never built for the level of reality the majority is comfortable accepting. You're not lacking connection. You're lacking people who can meet you at the level you live in. And once you realize that, once you understand what you actually are, your entire identity shifts. You stop questioning your nature. You start honoring it. You stop wondering why you don't fit in. You realize you were never supposed to. Because you see the world from a height most people never climb. And loneliness isn't the absence of people. It's the absence of those who can walk with you at that altitude. Here's what no one tells you. When you detach from the crowd, you break unspoken rules. Rules that say you're supposed to stay close, think the same, move in sync, mirror the group, and never wander too far from the comfort of collective identity. Most people aren't afraid of being alone. They're afraid of stepping out of line. So when you step back, when you stop performing, when you stop bending yourself to fit into spaces that don't feel like home, the people around you feel it. And many of them don't take it well. People who need approval resent those who don't. Your ability to walk away without flinching, without second-guessing, without asking for permission, hits them in a place they've spent their whole life avoiding. It exposes the cracks in their foundation, the parts of themselves they've hidden under constant social distraction, the truths they bury under laughter, noise, and endless company. Your independence shines a light on their insecurity. Because if you can be whole on your own, then what does that say about the version of themselves that only feels real in a crowd? You don't just move differently, you see differently, and your clarity disrupts their illusions. The illusion that everyone thinks like them. The illusion that they're the center of the story. The illusion that belonging is the highest goal. The illusion that the group is safe simply because it's familiar. When you stop participating in those illusions, it unsettles people who rely on them to feel stable. And suddenly, You become unpredictable. Not because you've changed, but because you're not performing anymore. You're no longer following the script the world handed you. You're not laughing on cue, nodding at the right moments, or acting impressed to keep the peace. You're no longer shaped by what they expect. And people fear what they cannot predict, especially when that unpredictability comes from inner strength. People feel intimidated by someone who doesn't chase belonging, someone who isn't scared of silence, someone who doesn't need validation to breathe, someone who can stand in a room and not ask the crowd for permission to exist. Your self-possession feels like defiance to those who need constant reassurance. Your confidence feels like rebellion to those who only feel safe when everyone is the same. Your clarity feels like danger to those who build their identity on what others think of them. And without you staying small, staying quiet, staying predictable, something shifts. You stop absorbing noise and they lose control. They can no longer drown you out. They can no longer pull you back into their emotional gravity. They can no longer use your attention as the anchor that keeps their insecurity from drifting. Once that anchor is gone, they're faced with themselves. And many people will do anything to avoid that confrontation. Because when you stop being influenceable, you become powerful in a way that unnerves them. You become someone who can no longer be manipulated by flattery, pressure, guilt, or expectation. You stop moving with the herd and begin moving with intention. You stop seeking direction from others and start navigating from within. And that shift, that inward shift, is what makes lone wolves grow at a speed the crowd will never understand. Because while everyone else is running from themselves, you're meeting yourself head-on. You're confronting the parts they avoid. You're exploring the depths they deny. You're facing the fears they drown in chaos. And the more you evolve inwardly, the more out of place you become in environments that reward conformity. Your growth threatens the people who depend on sameness. Your solitude threatens the people who depend on constant attention. Your insight threatens the people who depend on illusion. Your silence threatens the people who depend on noise. That's why some people pull away when you rise. Not because you've wronged them, but because your existence reminds them of everything they've been unwilling to confront. They avoid you not because you're lonely, but because you're free. And nothing is more uncomfortable to someone trapped in their own avoidance than watching a person who has finally broken out of theirs. There comes a moment in every lone wolf's life where everything that once felt like a flaw finally reveals itself as strength. You are not alone. You are aligned with your values, aligned with your intuition, aligned with the version of yourself you spent years uncovering. You no longer sacrifice who you are just to blend into spaces that were never meant for you. You are not distant. You are discerning. You choose carefully because you've learned the cost of choosing recklessly. You no longer open your heart to people who treat vulnerability like currency. You no longer give your time to those who waste it. You no longer offer your energy to anyone who demands it without offering anything in return. You are not cold. You are conscious. You feel deeply. You observe deeply. You connect deeply. But only where depth is met with depth, not where authenticity is met with performance. You are not a loner because you can't connect. You are a loner because you refuse to connect with the wrong people. You've learned that the wrong connections can drown your intuition, blur your boundaries, and silence your truth. You'd rather walk alone in honesty than walk with a crowd that requires you to betray yourself. Your solitude has shaped your self-awareness. It taught you what kind of presence you offer. It taught you what kind of energy you protect. It taught you what kind of person you become when no one else is influencing your identity. Your solitude didn't weaken you. It refined you. It stripped away the noise so your inner voice could be heard. It carved out clarity in places others only find confusion. It revealed strengths that only silence can uncover. Your depth is not a flaw. It's your advantage. It's the reason you see red flags others call potential. It's the reason you feel energy others call overthinking. It's the reason you sense shifts others dismiss as moods. It's the reason you recognize patterns long before they become consequences. Your depth is what protects you from repeating the same mistakes that keep other people stuck. Your depth is why you rise while others recycle their pain. You are becoming someone who moves differently. Someone who doesn't rush. Someone who doesn't chase. Someone who doesn't abandon themselves to keep a place in someone else's story. Someone who thinks slowly, deeply, precisely. Someone who takes time with decisions because they understand the weight of them. Someone who meets life with intention instead of impulse, clarity instead of chaos, truth instead of performance. You are becoming someone who belongs to themselves. You don't need a group to validate your identity. You don't need a relationship to give you meaning. You don't need approval to solidify your worth. Your belonging comes from within, from the quiet confidence of knowing who you are when no one else is watching. And that kind of belonging is unshakable, because no one can take away what they didn't give you. You are becoming someone who sees what everyone else misses, someone who catches the shift before it becomes a storm, someone who feels the truth before it's spoken out loud, someone who observes the world from a vantage point few people ever reach. You are not behind. You are not lost. You are not too different. You are ahead. You are awakening. You are evolving into the person you were always meant to become. This is your becoming, the rise of the lone wolf into their fullest, clearest, most sovereign self. You are not withdrawing from the world. You are stepping into your own. You are not shrinking. You are sharpening. You are not fading out. You are growing beyond. And the people who once misunderstood you will eventually realize you weren't distant. You were rising. There is a moment, quiet, decisive, irreversible, when you finally understand that you were never meant to move the way others move. You were never meant to flatten your depth to make yourself easier to digest. You were never meant to soften your perception so others wouldn't feel exposed. You were never meant to dilute your intuition to make the crowd more comfortable. Your distance was never distance. Your solitude was never emptiness. It was alignment. Your quiet was never weakness. It was power held in reserve. You were not designed to blend into the noise. You were designed to stand at the edges and see what the rest of the world is too distracted to notice. And maybe, for the first time in your life, you can finally hear the truth without resisting it. You're not hard to understand. They just can't meet you at the depth you live in. Because the people who misunderstood your silence never understood themselves. The people who judged your solitude never faced their own reflection. The people who accused you of being distant never knew how far inward they needed to travel to meet you where you are. You weren't meant to fit in. You were meant to see what they can't. And the more you rise into that truth, the clearer everything becomes. Your mind was built for depth. Your heart was built for truth. Your path was never meant to run parallel to the people who fear their own inner world. So now I want to hear from you, not the version of you that hides, not the version that shrinks, not the version that pretends to be less aware than you really are. I want to hear from the part of you that always knew you were different. Tell me, when did you first realize you weren't like them? Drop it in the comments. And if you don't know what to write, start with this: I see what they can't. Because you do. You always have, and you're finally ready to rise into it.